warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The story today is a sailor and a professor. Once upon a time, an old sailor and professor were having a warm chat during a long voyage. Even though it seems that his job as a sailor was simple, this man must have been sailing the ocean for a very long time. Surely he had learned something useful. The professor always wanted to increase his abundance of knowledge, which he thought was the meaning of his life. He approached the sailor and said, "Old man, how long have you been sailing?" The sailor replied, "Since I was a child, around the age of 13. "Amazing," said the professor. "You must know that in the oceans we are navigating there is so much life. As an experienced sailor, you must be an expert in marine biology, regarding all the animals that depend on the oceans below us, and all their currents and coral reefs. Let's talk about oceanology, marine science." The sailor got confused. Huh? Does the sea have knowledge? What? Ex- exclaimed the professor. In years at sea, you never read a book or learn about the contents of the ocean below you? "No," said the sailor. "You have wasted your time," said the professor as he walked away irritatedly at this old man who had spent his life in the ocean without ever learning about it. The next night, when the professor walked on the deck for the second time, again the old sailor was on guard there. The time the sailor was looking at the stars. It just so happened that this was also one of the professor's hobbies, astronomy. He thought, never mind, this poor old man might not know much about oceanology, but he certainly knows about astronomy. So he approached the old sailor. "I apologize about last night. You might not know much about oceanology, but I bet you know about astronomy, which happens to be my hobby too. Just look at the Big Bear constellation there." The sailor gasped. "What Big Bear?" That that star in the northern sky over there," pointed the professor. "You must know astronomy. That's what guides the direction of our ships." The sailor was confused. "I don't know what you are talking about. The captain knows about this, not me." "What?" screeched the professor. "Years at the sea, looking at the sky above, you never care about studying astronomy. You are wasting your life." The professor took a step in disgust. On the third night, the professor realized that the sailor might not know about the marine science or astrology, but he certainly knew about the weather, because the weather include patterns and wind power that propelled ships, as well as storms that could sink ships. So the weather must have been absolutely understood by this old sailor. He walked over to him and said, "I am sorry. I am really sorry. I have had a bad temper for the last 2 nights. I have misjudged you. You might not know anything about oceanology or astronomy, but I am sure you know about meteorology." Meteorology. "What meteor?" said the sailor innocently. "I do not know anything. I am just an ordinary sailor." "What foolish years at sea, how futile! You wasted your whole life." The professor laughed and vowed never to talk to this idiot again. The fourth night at sea, the ocean was raging. The seasick professor just rested in his cabin. The night was getting late. The storm got worse. He could feel the ship rocking even more. He could feel the ocean waves slapping the ship from the cabin window. Really, the weather that night was very bad. When the storm reached its peak in the midnight, he heard a crash, a big bang. He was afraid. After that loud sound, there was only a moment of silence, followed by the sound of people running and commotion outside his cabin door. Panicking, he opened the door. And guess who is running outside? The old sailor. The old sailor paused for a moment, turned to the professor and said, "My professor, for many years you have lived. Have you ever learned to swim?" No," whispered the professor. "This ship will sink," exclaimed the sailor. What is actually in the story from what is actually in the lesson from the story? The professor might have studied astronomy, oceanology, or meteorology, but the most important thing for a sailor to know is how to swim. Likewise, the most important thing to know in life is not knowing about electronics, cars, technology, but how to keep your head above the surface of the water in the currents and waves of uncertainty of life. But have you learned how to swim in case a ship sinks? So, what is meant by swimming? Knowing how to care, being compassionate, knowing what is really important in life, all the time you will never drown. There will still be things that we do not want to happen. There will still be people you care about die, but you have extraordinary compassion to let go. Extraordinary concern for the environment. Not anger, but great affection for the past. For the good times shared, to be able to be always grateful. Life is actually very, very simple. Life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated. Remember, life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated. Confucius. Okay, thank you very much for the time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the story. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.